Wade, we need to discuss your future here at Atlantic Defense. Judith Morgan didn't look up from her laptop when she said it. Her fingers kept typing, making those sharp clicking sounds that always reminded me of sonar pings bouncing off a hostile submarine. We were sitting in conference room B7, the one with the broken thermostat that made everything feel like you were trapped in a torpedo tube. I'm Wade Coleman, 55 years old, and I've been keeping Atlantic Defense's submarine communication systems operational for 18 years. That Tuesday morning, I thought I was going to another routine project review. Turns out, I was about to learn exactly what 18 years of classified expertise was worth to a company looking at their quarterly margins. Judith slid a manila folder across the conference table. Her watch caught the fluorescent light. Expensive, probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. This outlines the transition timeline for the submarine systems division. She said in that flat CFO voice they perfect after years of explaining why good people need to be let go for financial optimization. I opened the folder, Knowledge Transfer Protocol, 90-day timeline, Offshore Technical Support Integration. At the bottom in smaller print, like they hoped I wouldn't notice, Cost Reduction Initiative, Personnel Restructuring Phase 1. I'd seen corporate speak before, but this was different. This wasn't just moving my job to India. This was moving submarine communication protocols to people who didn't have security clearances. 90 days, I said quietly. Correct. That gives you adequate time to transfer your institutional knowledge to the Mumbai technical team. They're very capable engineers with impressive credentials. I leaned back in that uncomfortable chair. The Navy taught me to read between the lines, especially when someone was about to put your ship in danger. 18 years maintaining sonar communication systems for Los Angeles-class submarines gave me that instinct. But this wasn't enemy radar or torpedo locks. This was something that felt like sabotage from the inside. What about security clearance requirements? I asked. Judith's typing stopped for exactly 3 seconds. Then she forced that smile that looked like it required actual physical effort. The offshore team will handle non-classified systems integration while maintaining proper security protocols. Submarine communication arrays are classified at the TSSCI level. I said evenly. Every component, every configuration, every troubleshooting procedure. There's no such thing as non-classified submarine systems integration. The smile got tighter. Wade, you're being unnecessarily technical. The business requirements have been thoroughly analyzed. Cost projections indicate significant operational savings with equivalent service delivery. I let those words sink in for a moment. Equivalent service delivery. In the Navy, equivalent meant someone might die if you got it wrong. When a submarine's communication system fails 400 feet underwater, there's no margin for error. No customer service ticket, no 48-hour response time. You fix it immediately or people don't come home. I've personally maintained emergency communication protocols for 23 submarines over the past 18 years, I said. I've prevented 8 critical system failures that could have left crews stranded without surface contact. But you think engineers in Mumbai without clearance can provide equivalent service? Different skill sets command different market rates, Judith said, her voice getting that careful corporate neutrality. Offshore resources provide cost-effective solutions while maintaining quality standards. So, national security is worth whatever India charges per hour. Judith folded her hands on the table. Professional, controlled, completely unmoved by concepts like submarine crews or classified systems. Wade, I understand change is difficult, but this transition is happening whether you choose to participate or not. Your cooperation during the knowledge transfer period will be noted in your personnel file. Translation, play along or we'll make sure you never work in defense again. I thought about Ryan and Kevin, my 2 boys, both trying to build their careers while helping with their kids. I thought about the mortgage on the house Susan and I bought 20 years ago, the one I couldn't bring myself to sell after she passed. I thought about the 401k that had taken a beating during the pandemic and the health insurance premiums that kept climbing every year. Then I reached into my briefcase. Judith tensed slightly, probably expecting legal documents or union paperwork. Instead, I pulled out a single sheet of paper and placed it on top of her transition timeline. My resignation letter, her eyes dropped to the document. I watched her face change as she read the first line. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position as Principal Systems Architect at Atlantic Defense Systems. Wade, she started, voice cracking like a sonar array losing signal strength. I emailed a copy to your inbox at 10:17 a.m., I said calmly, along with copies to Ross Bennett, the DoD Contract Administrator, and the Security Compliance Officer. She stared at the signature, at the date, at words that couldn't be negotiated away or optimized for cost savings. You don't need to make this decision right now. This is hasty. We can discuss compensation adjustments. I've been thinking about it for 18 years, I said, standing up. This is me realizing that some things are more important than quarterly profits. Judith opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but you're supposed to train the replacement team. The contract timeline depends on your knowledge transfer. You told me to discuss my future here, I said, picking up my briefcase. So I have. My future is somewhere else. I left the resignation letter on the table and walked out. The sound of that conference room door closing behind me was like a pressure seal engaging on a submarine hatch. Final and watertight. Let me back up and tell you how an underpaid submarine systems architect and one cost-cutting meeting turned into the most expensive 36 minutes in Atlantic defense history. My name is Wade Coleman. I'm 55 years old, widower, father of 2 grown sons who've got families of their own. I don't have an MBA. I don't have fancy business credentials. What I have is an electrical engineering degree from a state university, 12 years in the Navy working on submarine communication systems, and 18 years of keeping some of the most sophisticated defense technology in the world operational. The Navy shaped how I approach everything. When you're 300 feet underwater and the communication array starts throwing error codes, you don't get to blame someone else or schedule a meeting. You fix it, document what went wrong, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Lives depend on systems working exactly as designed. That discipline served me well when I started at Atlantic Defense in 2006, right after Susan got diagnosed with cancer, and I needed a job with better health insurance. Back then, they were a medium-sized defense contractor trying to compete with companies 10 times their size. They had the submarine communication contract with the Navy, but they were running systems held together with legacy code and the desperate expertise of 3 overworked engineers. My interview was with Harold Peterson, the CTO at the time. He'd built his career on actual engineering work before getting promoted into management. "Can you keep these submarine systems from failing catastrophically?" he asked, pointing at a whiteboard covered in network diagrams that looked like a collision between a circuit board and a plate of spaghetti. "Depends," I said. "Can I actually fix the problems, or will I just be applying band-aids? If you can justify the changes and keep the Navy happy," he said, "you can rebuild whatever needs rebuilding." He hired me that afternoon. For the first 6 months, I just learned the systems. Sat in on emergency calls, read incident reports, traced signal paths, talked to the technicians who'd been there long enough to know where all the problems were hidden. The pattern was clear: reactive maintenance, no preventive monitoring, and documentation that was either missing or dangerously outdated. By month 7, I'd identified 12 critical vulnerabilities in our submarine communication infrastructure, not theoretical problems. Real failure points that had actually caused communication blackouts during training exercises. I documented everything, quantified the risks, estimated the cost to fix versus the cost of leaving submarine crews without reliable contact. When I presented it to Harold, he asked the only question that mattered: how long to fix all of this? 18 months of dedicated work, I said, and the authority to push back when people want shortcuts that compromise crew safety. "You have both," he said. I rebuilt the monitoring systems first because you can't maintain what you can't see. Created real-time diagnostics that showed not just whether communication arrays were working, but how close they were to failure. Signal degradation patterns, component stress indicators, all the early warning signs that let you prevent emergencies instead of just responding to them. Then I redesigned the redundancy protocols, real backup systems, not just spare parts sitting in a warehouse. Automated failover procedures that could restore submarine communication in under 90 seconds instead of the 20 minutes it was taking before. By year 2, we had 0 communication failures during Navy exercises. By year 3, our submarine systems had become the reliability standard other contractors were trying to match. By year 5, I was the person the Navy called when other contractors had problems they couldn't solve. That should have been the end of the story. Competent work, satisfied customers, steady employment, but companies change. Harold retired. New leadership arrived with different priorities. The shift started 2 years ago when Atlantic Defense hired Ross Bennett as CEO. Ross came from the tech industry with ideas about modernizing defense contracting and leveraging global talent pools for optimal cost structures. He loved phrases like streamline operations and competitive positioning. He did not love conversations about why submarine systems required experienced engineers with security clearances. Within 8 months, Ross had hired Judith Morgan as CFO. Judith's background was private equity, with a track record of optimizing operational efficiency at companies before they got sold to larger competitors. Her first presentation to the board was titled "Right-Sizing Technical Resources for Maximum Profitability." I should have seen it coming. The offshore strategy started small. Customer service calls got routed to Philippines call centers. Basic IT support went to contractors in Eastern Europe. Each time, management assured us that critical defense work would always stay domestic with cleared personnel. Then I started hearing about knowledge transfer initiatives and global technical collaboration, meetings I wasn't invited to, budget reviews for international engineering resources, presentations about leveraging offshore expertise while maintaining security compliance. 3 months ago, I accidentally discovered the real plan. I was looking for technical specifications when I clicked the wrong folder in our shared drive. Mumbai Technical Services, Submarine Systems Division, org chart, salary projections, training timeline, everything. They were planning to replace our entire submarine systems team with engineers making 1/4 of what we cost. The security clearance problem would be managed by having offshore teams handle integration work while cleared personnel maintained oversight responsibilities. Translation: fire the expensive Americans, hire cheap Indians, and hope the Navy didn't notice. I stared at those documents for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I updated my resume, really updated it. Listed every submarine system I'd maintained, every emergency I'd resolved, every innovation that had improved reliability or reduced failure rates. The list was longer than I expected. The communication array upgrade that increased signal clarity by 40%. The emergency protocol revision that cut response time from 20 minutes to 90 seconds. The predictive maintenance system that reduced unexpected failures by 85%. I sent my resume to 4 defense contractors I'd worked with over the years. Within a week, my phone was ringing. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 serious offers. Within 3 weeks, I'd accepted 1 principal systems engineer at Deepwater Defense Solutions. Base salary $315,000, bonus target 20%. Stock options. All I needed was the right moment to leave Atlantic Defense. Judith gave it to me by 11:45 a.m. My security badge had been deactivated. By noon, my system access was being revoked across all classified networks. By 12:15 p.m., I'd cleared my desk and walked past 6 colleagues who suddenly found their computer screens very interesting. By 1:30 p.m., the first critical alert started screaming. Here's what most people don't understand about submarine communication systems. They're not like your home Wi-Fi where you can unplug it and plug it back in. These are integrated defense networks that connect to nuclear submarines operating in hostile waters. When something breaks, you don't get to restart it and hope for the best. Every system has backup protocols, but those protocols require someone who understands not just how they work, but why they were designed that way. Someone who's seen them fail before and knows the warning signs that appear hours before catastrophic breakdown. I'd been that institutional memory for 18 years. Every unusual configuration, every custom modification, every workaround that had become critical infrastructure. All of it was documented in technical manuals, but understanding the documentation required understanding the context. Why this setting? Why this sequence? Why this particular combination of parameters that looked arbitrary but had been chosen to prevent specific failure modes? At 2:15 p.m., the USS Hampton lost communication during a training exercise off the coast of Virginia. Not complete blackout. That would have triggered immediate emergency protocols. Instead, signal degradation, intermittent contact, the kind of failure that makes submarine commanders nervous because they can't tell if it's equipment malfunction or hostile jamming. Lisa Foster, our senior systems analyst, was on duty. Good engineer with 6 years of experience, but she'd never seen this particular failure pattern because I'd always caught it during routine maintenance and fixed it quietly. Lisa did everything right, opened diagnostic sessions, examined signal logs, looked for patterns. She could see the symptoms, signal strength declining, error rates increasing, backup systems cycling, but she couldn't identify the root cause. At 3:20 p.m., the USS Albany reported similar problems, 2 submarines with communication issues during the same exercise. That's when the Navy started asking serious questions. At 3:45 p.m., Priya Sharma walked into our operations center. She was the lead engineer for the Mumbai team flown in specifically for knowledge transfer sessions. Smart woman with impressive credentials and 0 experience with classified submarine systems. "What is the current status of the communication array diagnostics?" she asked Lisa. "We're investigating signal degradation across multiple platforms," Lisa replied, not looking up from her screens. "Appears to be related to signal processing algorithms, but we haven't isolated the specific component failure. Have you attempted system restart procedures?" I can only imagine the look Lisa gave her. In submarine communications, system restart during active deployment is like suggesting a surgeon restart a patient's heart to fix a broken thermometer. You can make things exponentially worse very quickly. Submarine systems don't get restarted during training exercises, Lisa said. We need to identify and fix the problem while maintaining operational capability. How long will that require? I don't know. This isn't a standard failure mode. Priya pulled out her phone. I knew she was calling Ross Bennett. Ross arrived 12 minutes later. I could picture his expression perfectly, that carefully controlled look that meant he was calculating how much this crisis might cost him personally. Where's Wade? He asked immediately. He resigned this morning, Judith said. Over compensation restructuring concerns, I would have paid money to see Ross's face in that moment. You let our submarine systems expert walk out the door today? He made an emotional decision, Judith said defensively. We can't hold the company hostage to one employee's unreasonable demands. Ross left immediately. I know because at exactly 4:23 p.m. minus 36 minutes after I'd walked out of conference room B-7, Ross Bennett was standing outside my house, ringing the doorbell like someone whose entire career was about to disappear. Wade, he said when I opened the door. His normally perfect suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair disheveled. This was a man who prided himself on control, on having contingency plans for every possible scenario. Seeing him like this was better than any raise they never gave me. We need you back immediately, he said. The submarine communication systems are failing. The Navy is threatening contract suspension. 2 subs are operating with degraded communications during a training exercise. I looked at him through my screen door. I don't work there anymore, I know, but we need your expertise. The lives of submarine crews could be at risk. That sounds like your problem, not mine. His jaw clenched. Wade, please. Just for today, we'll pay you consulting rates, whatever you want. I shook my head slowly. No, why not? Because 36 minutes ago, your company made it very clear what my expertise was worth to you. So now you get to learn what submarine crews are worth without me. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Ross knocked 4 more times, each series more desperate than the last. Then I heard his car start and drive away, back to a crisis that was getting worse by the hour. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down to fill out onboarding paperwork for Deepwater Defense Solutions. My phone buzzed with text messages, missed calls, Slack notifications from an emergency incident channel. Someone had added me to despite my access being revoked. I ignored all of it. The crisis lasted 28 hours. I didn't watch it happen, but I heard about it afterward from Lisa, who called me a week later after everything settled. By 6 p.m., both submarines had returned to port operating on backup communication protocols. The Navy launched an immediate investigation into Atlantic Defense's system reliability. The DoD contract administrator sent a formal notice of performance concerns. By 9 p.m., Ross had called in emergency technical consultants. The lead engineer spent 4 hours examining our systems and finally admitted what everyone already knew. Without the original architect, this could take days or weeks to fully diagnose and repair. Ross looked at Mark Rivera, our current technical director. You're telling me we're dead in the water because one engineer quit. I'm telling you we're dead in the water because we treated that engineer like he was disposable, Mark said. And now we're learning what happens when the one person who actually understands these systems isn't here to save us. The consulting team worked through the night. 6 specialists at $850 per hour each, trying to reverse engineer 18 years of institutional knowledge. The bill hit $180,000 before they made any meaningful progress. The breakthrough came when Lisa remembered something I'd mentioned during a routine maintenance call 6 months earlier. There was an old technical note buried in our documentation system, something I'd written after a similar failure in 2019. It took her 3 hours to find it. Emergency communication protocol troubleshooting, signal degradation patterns and recovery procedures. Everything was there. The specific component interactions that caused cascading failures, the diagnostic sequences needed to isolate problems without triggering secondary issues, the exact parameter adjustments required for different submarine configurations. Lisa followed my documentation step by step. It worked. System stabilized, communication restored, submarines back to full operational status. The crisis was over, but the damage was permanent. Within a week, the Navy suspended Atlantic Defense's submarine communication contract pending a complete security and reliability review. The DoD investigation found concerning gaps in technical knowledge management and personnel retention protocols. Translation. They'd noticed that Atlantic Defense had fired their most experienced submarine systems expert to save money on salaries. Ross called an emergency board meeting. Judith was asked to pursue other opportunities. Priya Sharma returned to Mumbai with her team. The offshore strategy was quietly abandoned. Mark Rivera reached out to me 2 weeks later, professional email, carefully worded. They wanted to offer me the position of Chief Systems Architect. $285,000 base salary, 15% annual bonus, stock options, direct reporting to the board of directors instead of going through executive management. "I know we made a catastrophic mistake," the email said. "I'm asking for a chance to make this right." I read it twice, then responded, "I appreciate the offer, but I've already started at Deepwater Defense. I'm happy here. I hope you can rebuild your submarine systems program successfully," because I was happy. Deepwater Defense Solutions was everything Atlantic Defense wasn't. The founder, Captain Patricia Hayes, had spent 20 years as a submarine officer before moving into defense contracting. She understood that submarine systems weren't a cost center to be optimized. They were life support systems for people operating in one of the most dangerous environments on Earth. "What's the worst system failure you ever dealt with?" she asked during my final interview. I told her about a communication array failure during a 2018 exercise when the USS Connecticut lost contact for 6 hours while operating near Russian territorial waters. How I'd traced the problem through 4 different network segments and restored communication before the situation became a diplomatic incident. She nodded slowly. "If you join us, that knowledge doesn't walk out the door when you retire. It gets documented, shared, and built into our systems. We've learned that talented people leave. When they do, we make sure the organization keeps what they knew. Starting salary, $315,000 bonus target, 20%. Stock options, 15,000 shares. But more than the money, it was respect." On my first day, Patricia introduced me to the engineering team. "This is Wade Coleman. He's joining us as principal systems engineer. He has more submarine systems experience than most of us combined. When he tells you something about communication protocols, listen, because he's earned that authority through 18 years of keeping submarines connected. No qualifiers, no explanations about him being just a technical person, just respect." 6 months later, I'd rebuilt their submarine communication protocols using everything I'd learned at Atlantic Defense, but properly documented this time. A year later, I'd trained 3 other engineers to handle major incidents independently, not because I was trying to make myself replaceable, but because I was building something sustainable. When my first annual review came up, Patricia called me into her office. "You've exceeded every expectation we had. We're bumping you to $340,000 base. You're getting the full 20% bonus, and the board approved an additional retention grant of 10,000 stock options." "I haven't even been here a year," I said. "Exactly. We don't wait until you're threatening to leave to recognize what you're worth. We do it while you're here, before someone else tries to recruit you." 2 years later, I got another email from Mark Rivera. Subject line, "Consulting opportunity." Atlantic Defense was still struggling. They'd hired 3 different systems architects to replace me. 2 had left within 18 months. The institutional knowledge I'd carried was still missing, and they were losing contracts because of it. They wanted to bring me in as an external consultant for quarterly security reviews and knowledge transfer sessions. The proposed rate, $450 per hour, 6-month contract estimated at 200 hours. Total value, $90,000. For context, that was more than my entire annual bonus had been at Atlantic Defense for part-time work. I thought about it for 3 days, then I called Patricia. "My old company wants to hire me as a consultant. What do you think? Do you want to help them?" Part of me wants to say no on principle. Part of me thinks maybe they've actually learned something. If they're willing to pay you what you're worth now and they've genuinely changed how they treat people, then maybe it's worth helping them. Not because they deserve it, but because you'll know you took the high road. I did the consulting work. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to see if they'd actually learned. The first session was with the executive team, Ross, Mark, the new board chair. I presented one slide, the real cost of undervaluing technical expertise. I walked them through the incident timeline, the financial impact, the reputation damage. $52 million in lost contracts, $8.7 million in incident response costs, regulatory penalties, delayed projects, total damage over $60 million. All because they'd refused to value submarine systems expertise appropriately. "We made a catastrophic mistake," Ross said, staring at the numbers. "Yes, you did. How do you make sure this doesn't happen again?" I spent the next 4 hours teaching them what Deepwater had taught me. How to value technical expertise, document institutional knowledge, build systems for retention rather than replacement. Today, I'm 55 years old and making more money than I ever thought possible. When Deepwater goes public next year, my stock options will set me up for early retirement if I want it. But more than the financial security, I have something Atlantic Defense never gave me. The knowledge that my expertise is valued, not just tolerated. Here's the lesson I learned: when someone tells you to discuss your future, believe them. They're showing you exactly how much they value what you bring to the table. You can stay and hope things change, or you can leave and let them learn what you are worth. Sometimes it's not about revenge. Sometimes it's just about respect. And when the CEO is at your door 36 minutes later, begging you to come back, that's not victory. That's just confirmation that you were right all along.